So most people, when they're getting ready to sell their house, they want to know what their house is worth. That's the first step in selling your house. How much am I going to actually make on this house? So in order to determine that value, we use something what we call comps, or comparable properties. We want to know what the other properties near yours and like yours are selling for, so that we can determine what somebody else is going to pay for your house. So we would like to use what we call the 5 C's of determining a value based on the comps. The first C is, how close is it to your actual property? We don't want to be looking at houses. If we have a house in Seven Oaks, you don't want to be looking in Rosedale or something that's 10, 15, 20 miles away. You need to be looking right in your own neighborhood. So maybe a quarter mile, maybe a half mile at the most of how wide out from your property it is. If it's too much further out than that, it really might not be too accurate of an actual comparable sale. The second C is what we like to call the characteristics of the property. How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, what's the square footage, what's the lot size, what's the condition of the property? Is it newer? Is it older? Has it been remodeled? What's the condition of the roof? Is it outdated? All those things kind of take place when you're looking at these comps throughout the neighborhood. You're looking in your neighborhood. You want to look, okay, does it have the same bedrooms and baths as me? Is it a similar size? And then just look around your house. Does it look kind of similar to mine? Or is mine older? Or has theirs been done recently? Those are things to keep in mind. So that's the second C, is the characteristics of the property. The third C is what we like to call the condition of the market. Yeah, how hot is it? Is it starting to cool off? Is it still heating up? Bakersfield's been heating up for a long time. In fact, the entire country's been heating up for a while. So is the market really heating up, or is it starting to cool off? That's a big thing. That's why we always tell people that when we look at comps and we look at sales, we don't really want to go back any further than 6 months. And preferably, we'd like to keep it within 3 months or so, because that's more telling of what the market is doing right now as opposed to what it's done a year or 2 years ago. I mean, as we all know, this is not the same market as 2020 or 2021. This is still a changing market. We want to make sure that we're pricing accordingly to what's happening right now. So the fourth C that we like to call is contingencies and concessions. What was given to the seller and the buyer in those sales? So did the seller credit maybe $5,000 towards closing costs for the buyer? Because maybe someone sold the property for $400,000, but they credited $5,000 back. Does that mean that it sold for $395 instead of $400? Also, what if the buyer let the seller stay in the property for an additional 3 months or so after? Maybe they're willing to take a little bit of a discount in order for the convenience of not having to move out and rent something for 3 months while they find somewhere else. So contingencies and concessions are huge to pay attention to. And then our fifth C is what we call the conditions of the financing. So did they pay cash? Did they get financing? If they got financing, was it FHA? Was it conventional? Was it a VA loan? All those things come into play because there's different risks involved with finding a buyer that way. If you're paying cash, most of the time that's a lower price because it's super convenient. Those guys can close in maybe a week or two with cash. Or if it's FHA, maybe there's a few more steps you have to go through during the process, but you might get a larger sum of money at the end of it. So those are all things to take into account when you're looking at your property's value. How much is my home worth? Follow the 5 C's. We want to make sure it's close to our house. We want to make sure it has the same characteristics. We want to make sure that the market is in the same condition. We also want to make sure that the contingencies and concessions, if there was any, we want to take those into account. And then we want to make sure that we want to pay attention to the financing, the conditions of the financing, so that we can take those into account as well.